At my son's wedding. My daughter-in-law leaned over the table, pointed at the half-finished plates, and said lightly, "Mom and Dad, please finish the leftovers. You might never get to eat food like this again in your whole life." I stood there in an old suit I had pressed flat the night before, holding my wife's hand. Around us were clinking glasses, polished laughter, a kind of elegance that did not include us. No one looked our way. My son leaned in and whispered that I should eat quickly, then leave through the back door. In that moment, I understood something very clearly. I was no longer the father of the groom. We were just two unnecessary people, standing in the middle of a lavish party. Before I go on, if you're listening to this story anywhere in the world, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. I read every single line, and I truly value those who stay until the very end. Now then, let's go back to the moment when everything started to shift, very quietly, but just enough that there was no turning back. After that sentence, the air around our table felt drained away. The music kept playing. Forks and knives still touched porcelain. But for me, everything slowed by a single beat. I looked down at the table, seafood arranged like artwork. The kind of food I knew cost enough to cover an entire month of electricity at home. My wife sat upright, both hands folded neatly in her lap as if she were at a parent-teacher meeting, not at her own son's wedding. I had prepared myself for this day, not to be insulted, but to make sure I did nothing that might embarrass my son. I kept reminding myself, this is his day. All I needed to do was sit quietly, eat just enough smile when needed, and leave without a sound. I never expected my silence to be mistaken for acceptance. My daughter-in-law stood there, her white dress trailing across the marble floor. The lights reflected off her like she had stepped out of a magazine. Her voice wasn't loud. It wasn't sharp. That was what made it cold. She spoke the way someone rearranges dishes in a kitchen, not the way you speak to your parents-in-law. I looked at my wife. Emma didn't cry. She never cried in front of strangers. Her eyes lowered, resting on the spotless white tablecloth. I knew that look. She was counting her breaths, the way she always did when enduring something unfair. I was about to speak, not to argue, just to say that we weren't hungry. But before I could, my son leaned in close. His voice was low, quick, as if he were afraid someone might hear. "Dad, Tiffany just doesn't want food to go to waste. You and Mom eat quickly, then head out first. My friends are about to come over to this area." I didn't ask why. I saw the answer in his eyes. It wasn't cruelty. It was avoidance. He wouldn't look straight at me, as if not looking might make everything disappear. I used to think I understood my son. I taught him how to close a door without jamming it, how to keep his word, how to stand straight when speaking to others. But in that moment I realized there were things he had learned elsewhere, in a world I had never stepped into. The in-laws sat at the main table. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling laughed, loudly raised their glasses, signaled servers with practiced ease. I caught Mrs. Sterling's glance drift toward us, pause for a second, then turn away as if she had just noticed an unnecessary detail in a perfect picture. Emma placed her hand over mine, very lightly, not to stop me, but to remind me who I was. I tightened my grip. In my mind, I saw our small kitchen at home, where we used to have dinner with Oliver back when he was still a college student. Back then, even a simple meal was enough to make him laugh and talk all evening. Tiffany had already turned away, blending into the crowd. She didn't wait for an answer. For her, it was finished. For us, we were left sitting in front of half-eaten plates like a test where no one ever explained the question. I picked up my fork, then set it down. I didn't want to turn this moment into a scene. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew that if I spoke, everything would be twisted. People wouldn't hear my words. They would only see a father who didn't know his place at a refined celebration. Emma took a small bite. She chewed slowly, very slowly. I knew she couldn't taste anything. Neither could I. Every laugh around us felt like another thick layer of fabric laid over our table, separating us from the rest of the party. When we stood up, no one noticed. That hurt more than the words spoken earlier. I had believed that, at least on my son's wedding day, our presence meant something. But no, we were like two chairs placed in the wrong spot. My son walked ahead, leading us toward a side exit. No goodbye, no hug, only urgency. I followed, hearing my shoes echo softly against the cold stone floor. Emma walked beside me, her back still straight, her steps steady. Before the door closed behind us, I turned for one last look. The lights, the flowers, the crystal glasses. A celebration built to prove that my son had entered a different world. And that's when I understood. The greatest humiliation wasn't in the words, "Finish the leftovers." It was that they were spoken so calmly, in a place where we should have belonged. The side door closed behind us without a sound, just a soft click, enough to separate us from the celebration still going on inside. The night air in the Hamptons was colder than I expected. Emma pulled her thin coat closer. I stood still for a moment just to make sure my breathing stayed steady. We didn't leave right away. Emma said she wanted to take a short walk just to clear her head. I understood. Sometimes, if you get straight into a car, the hurt breaks open in the enclosed space. We followed the stone path leading to the back garden of the estate. Low yellow lights hung overhead, bright enough to reveal carefully trimmed bushes. Everything here was arranged so that nothing was out of place. Everything except us. The wedding gift we brought sat in a small wooden crate I had built myself. I sanded it smooth enough to reflect light. Inside were oak panels pre-fitted into a full dining table set. 6 months earlier, Emma told me that no matter where our son lived or what status he reached, a family table still mattered. So I built it. Every evening after work, with the old radio playing nearby, Emma sat beside me, embroidering a tablecloth. Each stitch straight, the colors calm and modest. She said it didn't need to be fancy, just strong. We passed the service area at the back where staff vehicles came and went. The smell of food mixed with damp grass. Emma suddenly stopped. She didn't say a word. She just looked toward a dark corner near a large trash bin. I followed her gaze, and a chill ran up my spine. My wooden crate was there, tipped on its side. The lid had come loose. The oak panels were exposed, scratched. I stepped closer and bent down. A shoe print marked the surface I had polished by hand. Beside it, the tablecloth Emma had embroidered was pulled out. One corner, stained with red wine, being used to wipe the stone floor. Emma stood behind me. I heard her inhale softly, then exhale. No crying, just a long stretch of silence. I turned to look at her. Her eyes no longer shimmered like they had at the table. They were calm. So calm it frightened me. At least she said quietly they didn't leave it out in the rain. I didn't answer. I picked up the tablecloth and folded it. The stain no longer mattered. What mattered was how it lay there, like something easily replaceable. I placed it back into the crate and closed the lid. Not to take it with us, but to keep things looking orderly. The habit of a craftsman. We walked back toward the path. The music from inside sounded farther away now. As we passed the guest house, I heard my son's voice. I stopped without thinking. Emma touched my hand gently, trying to pull me along. I shook my head. Oliver was talking with his in-laws. His voice was relaxed. Nothing like the whisper he used with me earlier. "My parents live very simply," he said. "They have a big property up north. They just don't like to show it off." I stood in the shadows, hearing every word. A big property. Up north. The words drifted out lightly, like air. Emma looked at me. I knew she heard it too. She wasn't surprised. Maybe she had prepared for this long before I had. Suddenly I thought of the deed to our small wooden house. It hadn't been in the drawer for weeks. Oliver said he needed to look over the paperwork for something not important. I had believed him, because he was my son. Standing there in the dark, the pieces fell into place. Quietly. No drama. Just a silent unveiling. Emma placed her hand on my arm. This time her grip was firmer. "You've heard enough," she said. "Let's go." We left before anyone noticed. This time, not out of shame, but because I didn't want to hear any more. In the car, Emma stared straight ahead. I drove hands steady on the wheel. The road stretched long and dark. We didn't talk about the table, or the tablecloth, or the words we had just heard. We let everything rest, like cracks that had already formed, needing no further pressure. Back at the small room we had rented, Emma sat on the edge of the bed. She took off her shoes and set them neatly aside. I stood by the window, looking at the distant lights of the estate. I thought about calling my son, asking him directly. But I didn't. Some questions once answered only make you more tired if you ask them out loud. Emma spoke first. "They don't need us," she said evenly, "but we still need each other." I nodded. Not a grand agreement, just an acknowledgement of something obvious. That night, I didn't sleep much. The party no longer played in my mind. Only the wooden table beside a trash bin, and the tablecloth used to wipe a floor. Things made with time and patience, treated as disposable. The next morning, Emma woke early. She brewed coffee. The familiar smell filled the small room. She placed a cup in front of me. "We're not going back," she said. Not as a question. I looked into the coffee. Steam rose slowly. I understood then. The moment at the wedding wasn't the end of a ceremony. It was the marker of a truth. From that point on, our steps would have to change. No noise. No resentment. Just a necessary retreat. Before everything broke completely. And I knew our next decision wouldn't be spoken at any table. It would be carried out in silence. Through action. The same way we had lived our entire lives. The decision to leave was never written down. It took shape slowly, through very small actions. That morning, after finishing her coffee, Emma folded the stained tablecloth and placed it into her bag. I watched her, then looked around the bare room. There was nothing here holding us anymore. We went home only to pack. We didn't call Oliver. We didn't leave a note. I opened the drawer where the documents should have been. It was empty. That emptiness confirmed what I had already suspected. I wasn't angry. I just felt a door close, softly but for good. Emma moved through the house, touching things one last time. She didn't take much. A few old books, the tea set, her sewing box. I dismantled the essential tools from the small workshop behind the house and packed them carefully. Everything else I sold. Not because we needed money right away, but because I didn't want to keep objects tied to a place that no longer meant anything. We left early one morning. The sky hadn't fully brightened yet. I locked the door, slipped the key into our neighbor's mailbox, and walked away. I didn't look back. I knew if I did, I would start measuring what I had given against what I received. I didn't want to do that. The road north was long and quiet. Emma slept for a while, her head resting against the window. I drove, thinking about the sea. I had built boats for other people before, but I had never thought about living near water. Maybe that was what we needed now. A place that didn't ask about the past. The coastal town in Maine was smaller than I expected. Low houses, faded paint. People greeted each other with a nod, no questions asked. We rented an old wooden house near the docks. The roof leaked in places. The floor creaked when you walked. But I felt at ease. Things that need fixing always remind me that I still have a purpose. I started by cleaning out an abandoned storage shed and leasing it long term. I hung a sign that read, "Boat Workshop made from leftover wood." The letters were uneven. The first day, no one came. The second day, an older man stopped by and asked if I could repair the bow of his boat. I nodded. We didn't talk much. He just needed to know I could do the work. Emma found a small space near the main road. She opened a used bookstore. No big sign, just a bookshelf outside the door. People came in out of curiosity, then returned because she remembered their names. In the evenings, she came home and told me who bought which book and who only came in to talk. Our new life wasn't loud. We worked, we ate early, we went to bed when only the sound of waves remained. No one asked what I used to do, or whether I had a son. I didn't tell them. Some stories are better left untouched when no one asks. One afternoon, while I was halfway through building a small boat, I received a notice from the bank. I read every line carefully. Mortgage documents, signatures, dates. My name and Emma's were there. But they weren't written by us. I folded the paper and placed it on my workbench. The wood beneath my hands was still smooth. I kept working. I needed to finish the boat before doing anything else. That evening I handed the paper to Emma. She read it. She didn't ask much. "You know what needs to be done," she said. "No blame, no questions about why our son would do such a thing. Just an acknowledgement that things had gone further than we ever imagined. We didn't call, we didn't write. I began reaching out to people who could help me understand the situation. I approached it the same way I build boats. Step by step, measured and careful. Emma didn't interfere. She trusted me, and I knew that trust was the one thing I could never afford to break. Time passed. My workshop gained regular customers. Emma's bookstore had familiar faces. We didn't become wealthy overnight, but every evening when we closed up, my chest felt lighter. No one here told us to eat quickly and leave through the back. One morning, Emma hung the cleaned tablecloth on the wall of her bookstore. Not for sale, just as a reminder. Some things are once treated as worthless, but still carry value when placed where they belong. I saw it, and understood that we had begun to heal, not by proving anything to anyone, but by living according to what we believed. We withdrew in silence. But that silence wasn't surrender. It was the pause needed before everything else could be rearranged. And I know that somewhere the decisions my son made are slowly making their way back to him. No reminders, no pushing, just the natural result of doors that were quietly closed. Summer in Maine arrived slowly. That morning mist still clung to the water when I opened the workshop door. The familiar scent of damp wood grounded me. I was adjusting the keel when I heard footsteps stop at the threshold. Not the kind locals make. They usually knock softly, then wait. This person stood there, hesitating. I looked up. Oliver. His jacket was wrinkled. No tie. His eyes were sunken like he hadn't slept in days. Behind him stood Tiffany. No trace of the confidence she wore at the wedding. Mud on her shoes. Hair tied back in a hurry. They stood close together as if the sea wind might knock them over. I didn't speak right away. I set my tools down and wiped my hands on my apron. The familiar motions helped keep my breathing steady. Oliver spoke first. His voice was rough. He said, "Dad," very quietly, as if testing whether the words still worked. Emma stepped out from the back, where she had been sorting small pieces of wood. She stopped beside me. Didn't step forward. Didn't step back. Just stood there, spine straight. I knew she had prepared for this moment ever since she hung that tablecloth in the bookstore. Oliver talked about bad decisions, about how everything had fallen apart faster than expected. I listened, but I didn't interrupt. I didn't need the details. I had already seen what happens when doors are closed. Tiffany cried. Not loudly, just pauses, as if even her tears were hesitating. When Tiffany took a step forward, reaching for Emma's hand, I saw Emma step back just slightly. Not out of fear, out of clarity. She turned inside, then came back with a brown paper bag. She placed it on the wooden table near the door. "Leftover breakfast," she said evenly. "Don't let it go to waste." The bag was light. There was nothing cruel in the way she set it down, just a repetition. Same words, same meaning now, in the right place. I looked at Oliver. His face changed. He understood. Not because of the bag, but because of the mirror held up in front of him. I stepped closer, just enough for him to hear clearly. I placed a stack of papers on the table beside the bag. No long explanations. Just what mattered. Documents. Signatures. What options remained. My voice stayed calm. I didn't use heavy words. I spoke the way I would to someone who measured wrong. If you don't correct it, what you're building won't stand. Oliver lowered his head. He read. His hands shook. Tiffany stopped crying. The air in the workshop grew thick. I didn't feel satisfied. I didn't feel relieved. Only that things were being set back into alignment, like warped planks that must be corrected so the boat won't tilt. "I won't give you money," I said, not because I don't have it, but because that kind of help would finish breaking what's left of you. Emma said nothing. She stood beside me silent. Her silence was the clearest boundary of all. Oliver signed. He didn't look at us. When he set the pen down, he let out a long breath, as if he had finally put something heavy on the ground. I placed the papers into the drawer. No victory, just completion. They stood there a few seconds longer. No one spoke. Then they turned and left. Their steps weren't rushed. They weren't slow. When the door closed, I heard the steady rhythm of the waves outside. No music, no lights, just an ordinary morning in Maine. That afternoon, I went back to work, measured the keel again, adjusted each joint. Emma went to the bookstore. We didn't talk about the morning. Some things once said fully don't need repeating. A few weeks later, I heard from people in town. Oliver and Tiffany were working at a small diner near the bus station. Hard work, cleaning at the end of the day, sorting leftovers. I didn't ask more, not out of indifference, but because I didn't want to turn it into a story to tell. Everyone learns their lesson in their own way. One evening, Emma came home with a thin notebook. She placed it on the table. "I've been thinking," she said. "If we've taken the house back, maybe we can use it for something else." We sat for a long time. We didn't talk about the past. We talked about young people in town, those who knew how to work with their hands, but had nowhere to start. I understood right away, not to prove anything, just to open another door in the right place. In the days that followed, I repaired the old wooden house, not to live in, to teach a trade. I worked slowly, carefully, the way I've always lived. Emma helped organize books and materials. She rehung the tablecloth in the corner of the room where the light fell just right. Some afternoons, when the workshop was quiet, I stood and looked out at the sea. I thought about that morning Oliver stood in the doorway. No triumph, just a quiet certainty. Fairness doesn't need noise. It arrives when there's nowhere left to hide. And I know our story didn't end with a confrontation. It continues in how we chose to live afterward. No turning back, no pushing anyone down, just moving forward with a straight back and steady hands, like building a boat meant to travel far without needing to show off. Everything that followed moved slowly, in the rhythm of the life we had chosen. The old wooden house was repaired bit by bit. I didn't hire outside help. I did it myself, the way I always do with things that matter. Replacing rotten beams, adjusting doors, sanding the floors again. Each swing of the hammer was a way of putting things back where they belonged. Not to erase the past, but to keep the past from controlling the present. Emma arranged the inside space. She brought in low bookshelves, long tables at a comfortable height. No large sign, just a small wooden plaque with the name she suggested, the Henry and Emma Vocational Fund. I looked at my name beside hers. It was enough. Nothing more was needed. Young people from town began to stop by. Some only looked. Some asked questions. I didn't promise anything grand. I just said, if you want to learn, I'll teach you. No fees. Only one condition. Show up on time and do the work properly. Emma sat in the corner of the room, taking notes, handing out books, making tea. She didn't teach with instructions. She taught by listening. One afternoon, I noticed a young man standing outside the door for a long time. Hands dirty, eyes unsure. I saw myself in him. I opened the door and nodded. No long introductions. He stepped inside. That was how it began. I didn't think about Oliver much anymore. Not because I forgot, but because I didn't want to keep space in my head for things that can't be fixed by hand. I heard that sometimes he stopped by Emma's bookstore late in the evening. He would stand outside, look in, then leave. Emma told me calmly. She didn't advise me to do anything. I didn't ask more. Some distances, once formed, need time to decide whether they should be closed or left as they are. Tiffany never appeared again. I assumed their new life didn't leave room for old habits. I didn't see it as punishment. Just adjustment. Everyone learns at their own pace. Autumn arrived. The sea changed color. My boat workshop finished a small boat, the kind I like. Not fast, not big, but steady. I gave it a simple name. No elaborate meaning, just something that could do its job. On launch day, Emma stood on the wooden dock, holding the old tablecloth. She didn't use it as decoration. She spread it carefully over the seat, like placing something valuable. I stepped onto the boat, checked everything one last time. When it left the dock, the water parted gently. I heard the wood respond, "Solid, sure." We went out a short distance, then stopped. No one spoke. I held the oars, keeping a steady rhythm. Emma looked toward the shore. I knew she was thinking about the years behind us. Not with regret, but with acceptance. So was I. On the way back, I thought about the sentence that once froze me in the middle of a lavish wedding. That sentence had made me believe I had become unnecessary. But now in the calm sea, I understood something else. A person's value isn't decided by where they're invited to sit, but by where they can stand firm. The vocational fund found its own rhythm. People came, people left. Some stayed long enough to open a path for themselves. I didn't hold anyone back. I just did my part. Emma remained the quiet compass. When disagreements arose, she didn't raise her voice. She asked questions, and those questions were usually enough for people to correct themselves. One evening as we closed up, Emma placed her hand over mine. "We did what needed to be done," she said. Not praise, just confirmation. I nodded. I never needed more than that. We never moved back into the old house. It had a different life now. As for us, we chose to stay in Maine, a place where every morning begins by opening the door and seeing faces that don't need to hide. If anyone asks whether I regret anything, I say no. I lost an illusion, but I kept my self-respect. I closed one door and opened many others, in the right places for the right people. Late in the afternoon, Emma and I go out to sea again. The boat drifts slowly. Small waves. The sky promises nothing special. And that's exactly why it feels enough. I hold her hand. The hand that has walked beside mine through so many years. No words. No proof needed. When people look down on their parents, they think they're climbing higher. In truth, they're cutting their own roots. Wealth can change direction overnight. But self-respect, and the bond between two people who stand beside each other when it matters, that's something no one can take away. The boat turns back toward shore. I pull the final stroke. The water closes behind us, smooth and quiet. Our story is the same. No noise, no display. Just an ending good enough to begin the peaceful days that remain. If this story made you pause for a moment, please subscribe to the channel, tap like, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. I'm not telling this to blame anyone, only to remind you that respect within a family is never unnecessary. Thank you for staying until the very last moments, for listening to my story all the way through. I wish you and your family the most precious thing of all, kindness toward one another, even in silence.